Hello, everyone. I'm Shadowproof's managing editor, Kevin Gosztola, and we're joined with John Kiriakou, former CIA officer. And he's been writing at reader-supported news about Jeffrey Sterling's case. So we're talking to him. We want to bring some more attention to what the Bureau of Prisons is doing to Jeffrey. So thanks for joining us, John.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so we recently published a letter from Jeffrey Sterling at Shadowproof, and you've been following what's going on with him in the prison. So for people who aren't aware, I guess, summarize where things are at right now. He's suffering from some very severe heart problems.
Right. Jeffrey has a very long-standing, serious heart arrhythmia that necessitated a hospital stay of more than 4 days. About 10 years ago. He was a candidate for a pacemaker immediately before he was incarcerated. He didn't have time to have that pacemaker installed, so he went to prison with this pre-existing heart condition. As you can imagine, his health has deteriorated in prison. I know from firsthand experience that prison healthcare is dismal at best, and Jeffrey just seems to be experiencing the worst of both worlds, having a pre-existing condition and having to have it treated in prison. And so he's had a series, really, over the last month or so, a series of heart episodes or incidents, I think he's calling them, where he experiences arrhythmia, tachycardia in some cases. He fainted in one case and had to be carried on a stretcher to the medical unit. And he has literally been begging to be taken to an outside cardiologist for an exam. And the prison refused to approve such an exam until very recently. And even then, when the outside exam was finally approved, after Jeffrey had been shackled hands and feet and taken to this outside medical professional, the prison never gave that doctor his medical records. And so the doctor had no idea what he was examining, no idea what he was supposed to be looking for. And as a result, all Jeffrey ended up getting was a prescription for a beta blocker.
Right, and there's a few problems with that. I mean, one, if you're in shackles, you probably couldn't take the proper tests because you're going to have an elevated heart rate anyways because you're in that sort of condition. And on top of that, what Jeffrey is talking about and describing is symptoms of atrial fibrillation, and the prison is insistent that he does not have this history, it would seem, from what Holly, his wife, has shared. They insist that he doesn't have this serious condition. So would you talk about how the prison is under this, or I guess whether they believe it or not? We don't know if they actually truly believe this or not, but what they're doing publicly is putting on this face that he's fabricating medical information. So would you address that?
Yeah, this is a common tactic used in the Bureau of Prisons. It's called malingering. And if you are determined to be malingering, that is claiming health maladies that you don't have, you are subject to disciplinary action, which includes being committed to solitary confinement, losing your visiting privileges, your telephone privileges, your email privileges. They can really make your life miserable. Now, why would they do that? Well, they do that because they don't want to treat you. They don't want to treat a prisoner that has an expensive health problem because they don't want to pay for it. Now, couple that with the fact that the Bureau of Prisons is a dumping ground for failed medical professionals, and you have just a perfect storm. It is easier for the Bureau of Prisons, and certainly cheaper for the Bureau of Prisons, for a prisoner to die in their custody than it is to treat them over the course of a period of time.
And from your experience, so you were incarcerated for what, 24 months? Is that
23 months? Yes.
23 months, and your experience in prison probably reflects what Jeffrey said. I mean, exactly at the end of his letter, he wraps up saying, "Truly, to FCI Englewood and the BOP, the life of an inmate is a cheap commodity."
It is indeed. In the short time that I was incarcerated at FCI Loretto in Pennsylvania, 4 other prisoners died, and all 4 of them died of preventable illnesses. A couple of heart attacks and 2 cases of cancer. In one case, I actually was friendly with the man. He lived in a room that was directly across the hall from the chapel where I worked, and I used to sit at the same table. He and I sat at the same table in the cafeteria, so I would stop by and say hello. One time I stopped by and he complained to me that his back was just killing him, and he had gone to medical and they gave him Tylenol, and the Tylenol did nothing. I saw him a week or 2 later and he was using a cane. I saw him a week or 2 after that and he was using a walker. To make a long story short, I finally went to the chaplain and I said, "Chaplain, this poor guy is obviously in distress, and medical is not giving him anything other than Tylenol. They won't take him out for an x-ray. They certainly wouldn't pay for an MRI. They just kept giving him Tylenol every time he would go to the medical unit, and they threatened him with a malingering shot." So finally, to his credit, the chaplain went to the head of the medical unit and said, "Please give this guy an exam." They finally took him out to a hospital where he had an x-ray and was found to have stage 4 spinal cancer. And he died just a few weeks later. So, and you know, just to put a cherry on top of this whole story, just nights before this poor guy's death, the warden went to his room and said that he would approve a compassionate release if the prisoner signed an agreement to not sue the Bureau of Prisons. And he refused to sign the agreement, and he died in his bunk in prison. That's just typical of medical care in prisons across the country. This wasn't specific to Loretto. It wasn't specific to this one prisoner. This is what Jeffrey Sterling is up against, and it's not going to get any better.
Right, and it's somewhat chilling when you think about it. I shared with him a story you had put in, or some anecdotes that you had put in your last letter from Loretto, and how you had summarized the problems with medical at Loretto. And I believe you told a story of one prisoner in there who had suffered from something serious. And he came back with, okay, that's normal. And he named this prisoner who he called William and talked about how William had died. And it first from a situation very similar to what Jeffrey is going through right now. So he has this very chilling recent example of what could happen to him. So one other thing that's really critical about Jeffrey's story is that on September 17th, he went and had a meeting with medical, and they're acting like it didn't happen because he was told that he has elevated levels of troponin, which suggests that he probably suffered some kind of a heart attack.
Yes. Yeah, this is also typical of what the Bureau of Prisons medical units across the country will do. It's my own personal belief that the medical staff member, the public health service staff member who examined Jeffrey, purposely did not include a write-up of that appointment in Jeffrey's records. And it is really meant to cover himself in the event that Jeffrey has a more serious heart attack or dies while he's still in prison. You know, I spent 15 years with the CIA, Kevin, and over the course of those years, I had occasion to come into contact many times with medical professionals from the U.S. Public Health Service. And I found them to be just terrific people, good medics, committed, patriotic. I had exactly the opposite experience when I was in prison. I was shocked to find that public health service professionals were the physician's assistants that were seeing prisoners, seeing patients every day. These folks were the dregs of the public health service. These were the people who just couldn't cut it anywhere else in government. And so they were dumped into the prisons. And I'll give you another example. When I first arrived at Loretto, we have a doctor about whom most of the prisoners I knew spoke very highly. And about 6 months into my sentence, he resigned. He didn't ask to be transferred. He resigned and went into private practice because he said the Bureau of Prisons would not allow him to treat prisoners the way he wanted to treat them, which meant to send them to outside medical appointments, to prescribe the medications that he thought they needed. We had a period of about 6 months with no doctor at all. And then after those 6 months, they hired a failed child psychiatrist who had been asked to leave one of the major teaching hospitals here in the United States. So really, you get the worst of the worst in the medical field. Don't forget that half of all doctors graduate in the bottom halves of their class, right? Somebody's got to be ranked last in their class in medical school. And frequently those doctors end up in prisons.
And so on top of all of what you just shared is the duress and stress that you go through as a family member trying to communicate your needs. So Holly, the wife of Jeffrey, has been calling the Bureau of Prisons, trying to impress upon them the need for assistance. And I guess share some of what the Bureau of Prisons has been telling her and how this compares to, well, the way you were handled. But I guess fortunately, you were never really in a situation like Jeffrey.
No, I was fortunate. I did have to go to an outside appointment one time because just 1 week into my sentence, I broke a finger. And I did everything the way I was supposed to. I went to medical. I said, I have a broken finger. And the physician's assistant, the PA from the public health service, said, no, it's not broken. I said, listen, I've broken bones before. I'm telling you it's broken. We went back and forth for more than 2 weeks. Finally, 16 days after I broke the finger, he allowed me to go to an outside hospital to have an x-ray. I was shackled just like Jeffrey. My hands were shackled in front of me. My feet were shackled so I could only take baby steps. And then my hands and feet were chained to each other. And I got my x-ray and the doctor said, well, it's broken. It's broken. But there's nothing we can do it because it's already begun healing itself. And so I'll never regain full use of my finger. It's just a pinky finger. It's no big deal. With Jeffrey Sterling, it's his heart. And these prison officials just don't want to acknowledge the fact that the guy has an illness, a disease that has to be treated, or it's going to get worse, and it may get worse to the point of death. What Holly Sterling has been doing, and I've encouraged this in my own writing at Reader Supported News, is she's been contacting the Bureau of Prisons regional office in Denver, and she has spoken with an official there who was really not helpful in any way, and in fact threatened Holly a couple of times, saying things like, I don't have to speak to you. You know, it's a favor that I'm doing for you, speaking to you. I don't have to tell you anything. I don't have to do anything for your husband. Well, that's not going to help anybody's situation to get into what amounts to a pissing match with the wife of a prisoner. If the guy has a medical problem, then fix it. It's your duty as a medical professional, whether you're in the Bureau of Prisons or not, it's your duty to get this thing taken care of. But they seem to be willing to do only the bare minimum, and that's only when they're pushed. Now, I know from responses to my own pieces on Reader Supported News that about 150 people have called the regional office in Denver to demand medical care for Jeffrey. And I think that it's pissed them off a little bit. Now, perhaps, and I like to think this is the truth, perhaps it's pissed them off enough that that it's pushed them into action.
Well, Jeffrey certainly thinks that the only reason he was able to see that outside specialist was because of people calling the BOP. And in conversations with Holly, this is the sort of pressure that they want to keep up. So, you know, coincidentally, I have the numbers right here, and I'll just take a moment. I'll do it again at the end of the interview. I mean, we're almost finished, but for the North Central Regional Office, you can dial 913-621-3939, or you can call FCI Englewood, the prison where Jeffrey's being held, and that's 303-763-4300. And so those are the numbers, and it's working because people, you know, I guess talk about what your experience was on the inside, just to emphasize what it was like knowing that people were paying attention to your case. And that is a huge deal, and it gives you a lot of power to protect yourself against prison officials?
I truly believe, and I've written about this, that you and Brian Sonnenstein at Shadowproof and Jane Hampshire at firedoglake.com before you, well, you were there as well. I believe that you three in particular were responsible for my safety in prison. And I don't mean my safety vis-a-vis other prisoners. I mean my safety vis-a-vis the prison administration. I was in danger of being put at one point into something called diesel therapy because of my writing and blogging. And it was because you published that allegation. And there were something like 1,600 calls to the director of the Bureau of Prisons demanding that I not be put into diesel therapy, that I wasn't. And that the warden, the assistant warden, and most importantly, the guards kept their hands off of me. What diesel therapy is, I'll just say quickly, is if the prison has a troublesome prisoner, they'll put him into what's called transportation status. So that means they'll put you on a bus and send you to a transportation hub. In my case, it would have been the U.S. Penitentiary in Canaan, Pennsylvania. Now you can sit there for 2 weeks, or you can sit there for up to 6 months. Then they put you on a bus to, let's say, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania airport, and then they fly you to another transportation hub in Atlanta, Georgia, at the penitentiary there. Eventually, you make your way to the central transportation hub in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and then maybe Yankton, South Dakota, or Englewood, or California, or wherever. Anywhere in America, there are so many prisons. The reason they do that, though, is because when a prisoner is in transportation status, he does not have access to a telephone, to an email, or to pens and paper. And it's the only way, really, that they can legally silence someone. And transportation status, can last up to a year. You can be in transportation status for that long. Well, I only had something like a year left on my sentence. And they were talking about ways to get me to stop writing. I have no doubt in my mind that at FCI Englewood, they have had similar conversations about how to silence Jeffrey Sterling.
And I do believe that when I was talking to Holly, she mentioned something about not just Jeffrey, but the entire unit where Jeffrey is being confined, being told that they would lose email privileges, mostly on a whim, just an arbitrary whim that this prison official was upset about something someone did and was willing to take that means of communication away. So it doesn't need, I mean, that's how quickly you can lose your connection. So yes. My last question is the demand right now. It's just to focus on what people should be, if they're interested in supporting Jeffrey and contributing to this outside pressure. What they need to do is impress upon the officials that he needs a certain thing. Holly believes that that demand should be seeing an outside doctor. The prison can't take care of this issue. They've already failed Jeffrey. They will continue to fail him. What do you think about her attitude, especially based on your experience?
Yeah, I think Holly Sterling is exactly on point. The prison has already proven several times that they are either unable or unwilling to help Jeffrey Sterling. The only way that he can be treated properly and appropriately is by an outside specialist. And that's really what we all have to push for.
All right, John, I'm just going to read these numbers so people have them again. If you would like to call the facility and help out Jeffrey, the Bureau of Prisons North Central Regional Office, which Colorado is under, is 913-621-3939. FCI Englewood, the facility where Jeffrey is being held, is 303-763-4300. And again, thank you, John, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.